Welcome back, everybody, from lunch. Hopefully, you're warming up as you're acclimating to the room, as I am. We're going to get started here. We have a few introductions to do, including myself. My name is Eileen Acello, and I work at the Academy of Food Marketing here at St. Joseph's University. I'm the Director of Recruiting and Development, which is basically fundraising. And Mara was kind enough to let me have a few words today to let you know about the largest major here at St. Joseph's University, which is food marketing. Some of you know about the program because you are alumni, and some of you may not have heard about the program, but we're one of 5 in the country. And our program is very unique, aside from being the largest at the university in the Hobbs School of Business. We are unique in the sense that we give scholarships out to our students through our fundraising efforts. We place our students in jobs, internships, and co-ops. We have a 5-year co-op program. We also recruit them from high school to come to St. Joe's for food marketing. So our program is unique in that way. Now, ways that all of you can get involved if you don't know about the program and want to know more is you can become a sponsor for programs that we have. You can become a guest speaker for our Food Marketing Association, which is a student-run organization for students that are food marketing majors, or you can become a speaker for our Aspire group, which is a offshoot or spin-off of the network of executive women here in the greater Philadelphia area. And there's a few universities that have an Aspire group. So speaking of Aspire, I have the pleasure of introducing today Stacy Miller, once again, our panelist today. Stacy is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for I'll Hold USA. She's a program lead for the College Outreach Program, which is how I know her. And she started a mentor-mentee program here at St. Joseph's University through our Business Aspire program. She also works with Shippensburg and Penn State of Harrisburg and other schools she's working on. I would like to recognize Stacy for an award that she received from the Network of Executive Women in September in Orlando. I was lucky enough to be there with her and celebrating. It was such a horrible time, wasn't it? Yeah, it was horrible. We had no fun at all. Yeah, we won't talk about time. This past September, she received the Greater Philadelphia College Outreach Award, and it was a very exciting event. And with that, I would like to bring Stacy up here to introduce our keynote speaker of the day. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, again. And one thing that I'd like to do before I give a little bit of a background about our company and the D&I initiatives is to share a little bit more about the Aspire and what Network of Executive Women is doing, and especially around the college outreach. Across the regions that Network of Executive Women have is to provide a variety of different types of programs, not only for the personal development and learning of those members and guests, for their learning events and mentoring programs and mixers, but also to give back or pay it forward. And the College Outreach Program is one where we are partnering with a variety of different schools across the U.S. and Canada, and helping to support the education and development of the young women within those schools. And we do include men too, but it is primarily women that we're supporting. And so each of our chapters run a little bit differently, and I was really thrilled this past year to be able to kick off a mentoring program in which we hosted over 30 students from Shippensburg University, Drexel University, University of Penn, and also here at St. Joe's University, in a one-on-one relationship mentoring with industry leaders, individuals that have been there in their shoes and are now today leaders within their organizations. And we will be repeating this again, so this is my sales pitch, and we are looking for mentors for this upcoming year. Confirmed that we have St. Joe's, Shippensburg, and Penn State Harrisburg on board with us. We're continuing to build relationships with Drexel and University of Penn. but it is something that was valuable for both the mentors and the mentees, and it's really a mentee-driven program. But if you're interested, see me later, and I can give you more information about it, and hopefully you'd like to join in the fun, and it was a lot of fun. So let me tell you a little bit about Ahold and a little bit about where we are within our diversity inclusion journey. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 promises that we as an organization are committed to, and that is to be a better place to work, a better place to shop, and to be a better neighbor. In the D&I journey, we have not only our overall corporate initiatives, but within our business resource groups, every single one of our business resource groups is tied to the business and tied to supporting these promises. We have 7 business resource groups. We have one for abilities, people with different abilities, and their caregivers. WAVE, Women Adding Value. Pride, which is our LGBTQ community and allies. Veterans, for veterans, their family members, and also allies and supporters. And our Ahold Developing Professionals, which is our generations or our young Ahold. Alana, which is our multicultural, and also working parents. And one individual had said, what about working mothers? And it's like, well, there's men too that are parents, so we want to be inclusive of them. And each one of them is doing a variety of different things to help drive the business forward, develop our associates, and also, continue to partner with within the network, within our communities. We, through these initiatives, and we have chapters of almost all of these BRGs within our brands, and our brands are the divisions with that. So again, Giant is what you would be familiar with here, and through that we have 15 chapters across our 3 brands, along with our support office. And so this has all grown within the past year and a half, so this is all new. And we've been doing remarkable things. And we've also, because of this work, Ahold USA and its brands have also been recognized by Diversity Inc. as one of their top noteworthy companies. And we also received a 95% on the HRC CEI index, Corporate Equality Index, and with anticipation of 100% this year due to some enhancements of our transgender benefits. And we're looking forward to that. Our strategy is to truly be an inclusive and, in our environment for our associates, our customers, and our communities, and through engagement, partnerships, and development of our teams. We leverage the diversity of our associates to drive us forward. It takes a vision and a passion to do this and to really, truly move the needle. Tara J. Frank is one of those leaders who, is one of sorry, I wrote my notes. But Tara is truly a leader that I have had the opportunity to meet and to be present in a variety of venues in which she has been either a facilitator or a keynote speaker, and she is truly inspirational. You have all heard her bio before, but for being a woman, being the first Black female vice president, really breaking ground within the industry and into that space is a huge a demonstration of what she is and what she can achieve. And I know that I have enjoyed her in the past, and I know that everybody will also enjoy her. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Tara J. Frank.
Good afternoon. Thank you. That's better. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm extra loud. Anyone controlling the volume control here? It is so good to be here with you this afternoon. First, I want to thank Mara and the entire SJU team. Thank you so much, Stacy, for the wonderful introduction. It is always a pleasure for me to be in a room full of women and allies who support the growth and development and really just talent, unique talent that women can bring to the table, already do and will continue to. So I'm excited to be here. Every time I get ready to do something like this, I ask myself, what is the universal truth about this particular topic, right, or this theme? So the theme that we're all coalescing around here today is what women want. What is the universal truth about what women want? On one hand, last night we were at dinner, and I think Maura actually nailed it. We were talking about dessert for 30 minutes. Nobody ordered any, but we talked about it for 30 minutes, and she said, women want chocolate. I'm like, I maybe have to redesign my entire presentation because I think you're a little right about that. So yeah, we want some things in our day-to-day experience, but there are other things we want, and we know generally what they are. We may not talk about them all in the same way. We may not use the same words. We may not have the same experiences to bring them to life. But generally, we as human beings and as women want the same things. Yet, we don't all have those things that we want. So does anybody want to share your perspective on why we may not, in the working world, right, that's the context for this particular keynote, why we may not yet have what we want? I'm talking about internal reasons, right? Because we can talk about bias and systemic discrimination for like probably a year, but we're not talking about that. When it comes to the things that we control, that we influence, why may we not have what we want quite yet? Anybody have a thought about that? Yes, in the back. Mm-hmm. Right, so we want to be perfect before we try something new rather than let the new experience perfect us. Very well said. Anybody else? I saw somebody down here, yeah?
I think internally it's a struggle to know if you're crossing that fine line as a woman and maybe not susceptible to be assertive, to be responsive.
Right.
Instead of a leader. And I am more concerned about people liking me than, showing my worth and having people respect me, which is something that I guess we have to society.
That's right. So very universal. We don't want to come across as too bossy. We know we need to be assertive, but we don't want to be aggressive, right? So kind of that whole entire conversation we have in our minds. Somebody over here?
Sometimes we don't think we're good enough or we don't deserve it.
That's right. Sometimes we don't think we deserve it. We don't think we're good enough. So lots of reasons why we don't have what we want. Sometimes we're afraid that if we receive it, we won't be prepared. What if I ask for this and I actually get it? What am I going to do with it, right? Whatever the it is. Am I really ready to take on that big new challenge, however we define it? So lots of reasons why we don't yet have what we want. In this time together today, I'm going to share with you 5 things I've discovered are universally true that women want. And if you disagree with any of them, feel free to stand up and say, no, I don't. That is not universal. I don't want that. And then we can talk about that maybe afterwards, but we can talk about it. But universally that women want. Now, the aha here is not in the what, right? The opportunity for you is not in the what. The what is not rocket science. The what will not shock you. The opportunity lies in the so what. So if this is what I want, what do I need to do differently, right, in order to better my chances of achieving it or receiving it? How do I need to show up? Who else do I need to work with? What risks am I willing to take? So what's going to happen over the next little less than an hour is, just to warn you, I'm not going to talk at you for 40 minutes. I don't do that. Please have your notebooks out and your pens. I will ask you some questions. I will ask you to take some notes. I may ask a person here or there to share. I'm notorious for asking for audience participation, so people who like to come to keynotes and sleep don't ever come to hear me speak. It is usually a very dangerous thing to do. I tend to pick on the people who look especially sleepy, just so you know. I'm kidding. Just so you know. But we're going to have a good time, and hopefully, my hope, which is always my hope, is that this conversation today will plant seeds for you, right? It won't answer all of your questions. It doesn't mean you're going to walk out of this room and have exactly what you want when you didn't when you walked in, but seeds of inspiration that will turn into ideas and ultimately turn into plans. That's pretty much my hope. Seeds of inspiration. If you walk out today with seeds of inspiration, I feel like I've done my job, and hopefully you feel like you've spent your time well, okay? So I want to start with a quote, which I think is always a good way to begin. I was really inspired by this. Bo Bennett, who I didn't know before I started searching for quotes, is actually a really young businessman. And he has this quote out there that says, "Those who improve with time embrace the power of personal growth and personal achievement, and begin to replace youth with wisdom, innocence with understanding, and lack of purpose with self-actualization." It's a mouthful, but what I really responded to is this notion of those who improve with time. Usually you see quotes like this, and it says, those who succeed, those who excel, right? Those who win. Success, winning, this whole thing is not necessarily a destination, right? I think we all know from our own experience it is very much a journey. And the point for me is my trend line going in the right direction? Am I getting better with time? Am I getting wiser with time, right? Am I doing more, giving more, having more of an impact with time? And I think that's one of the things that we as women, as we grow, as we mature, right, as we kind of continue along our life path, we just want to do more, to be more, and to give more. And that's really part of the foundational idea here. So 5 things that women want. One of them is impact. We want to make an impact, and that word has already come up today. So again, not a new idea, but impact through the lens of meaning, right? So we all kind of generally have the pursuit of meaning. And I've met so many women. I do coaching, I do, training and facilitation, and that's especially true when you get to a certain point in your career and you kind of say, my career has been about ABC, and now I want to do something that means something, right? I want to leave a bit of a legacy. I want to make an impact. We also know that's not necessarily an age thing, because the social consciousness of our youngest citizens is higher than it's ever been also. So we want to make an impact, and we'll talk more about that and what that looks like. The second thing we want is respect. Who does not want respect? No hands, see? Everybody wants to be respected. We want to be respected, especially in the work environment. I want you to respect me for what I know, for what I've done, for what I've been able to achieve, right? And for the unique perspective that I bring to the table. So we'll unpack that a little bit. The third thing we want is growth. I purposely do not call this advancement or promotion, because growth is not always just about that. Right? Growth can be about learning, about development. We can grow our networks, right? We can grow our ability to make a difference and, again, have an impact on the world. So we want growth. We don't want to be stagnant, right? Mara opened this up and said, gosh, many women feel stuck. What are we going to do to feel and to get unstuck? So we want growth. The fourth is flexibility. I tend to think of this in a work context as flexible freedom. In my new firm, that's what we call it, flexible freedom. We want the freedom to flex our lives, our responsibilities in a way that leaves us whole. We want the flexibility, right? And some environments are more flexible than others. I do feel that those who are unable to flex, to be a little bit more agile, will find themselves having a harder and harder time retaining their top talent, right? Flexibility is something I think we all want. And then number 5, we want alignment. So Jen Groover was talking this morning. She used the word harmony like 5 or 6 times, and I always key in when someone uses the word harmony, because it's true that women do seek harmony, not only in the sense that, we're getting along and kind of there's peace in this situation, in this place, in this relationship, but we also seek the kind of harmony that brings ideas and places, right, and our own beliefs and values into alignment. And so we want harmony. So we'll talk about each of these things, and I'll ask you to do a little bit of self-reflection with your notepads and your pens as we go through them. Because again, it's not just about the what, it's about the so what. So let's start with impact. So we want to make a difference, right? We want opportunities to drive business results that matter. We want to be on the front line of what's going to make a difference, right? And we really want to ultimately leave a legacy. So this whole notion of opportunities to drive business results that matter, I bring this up because sometimes when we talk about purpose and when we talk about impact at work, folks tend to make it completely kind of altruistic in nature. And it is some of that, but it's not all of that. We also want to make a difference on the bottom line. right? And so you probably hear a lot of people talking about, we need women in P&L positions, right? We need women all over the place. And there are often a lot of women at the top in staff roles, right? Staff roles being HR and finance, et cetera. Those are very important positions, and we need women to continue to inhabit them and grow in them. But we need women in other places too, right? We need that broadened perspective across the entire business. And many of us do want the opportunity to play in that way. And so when you think about you and what kind of impact you want to have, I want to tell you a little story and then ask you to do some reflection. So the very first large executive management job I had was vice president of creative writing and editorial at Hallmark. So essentially what that meant is anyone who had anything to do with the words, right? The writers, the editorial strategists, the editors, the proofreaders, everybody, reported up through my organization. And I had a partner who pretty much led the design side of the greetings business with me. So we led the creative, everything creative for the greetings business, which is naturally the bulk of Hallmark. And so since it was such an important position, right, an important part of the business, we got gifted with an executive coach, right off the bat. How many of you have had an executive coach or at least had a conversation with one before, right? So it's a neat experience, one I think everybody should have at some point in life. So we had a day away, we had an offsite. And she asked us early on in the day, she asked me, so what is your purpose in this work? What's your purpose? So I'm like, at the time, I think I was 29 or 30. And I said, well, I want to develop the talent, and we want to make good product, and we want to drive the business. And she cut me off. She was like, no, I'm not asking you about your job description. I'm not asking you about your objectives, right, or your goals. I'm asking about your purpose. And so she essentially said, how will these people in this work be different and better as a result of your leadership? What are you really going to do, right, to change the trajectory of this work and these people? What is your purpose in this work? And at the time when she asked the question, I didn't fully appreciate the gravity of the question. I was honestly just trying to get it right. I'm like, hold on, let me think about it. So I went away for a while. She gave us that time and space, and I came back and I said, okay, I got it. So at the time, just to give you some context, that job, some of the folks in editorial, they didn't feel that they were having as much of an impact on the work or on the business as they felt they could, right? So there were some areas where the writing came first, and other areas where, quite frankly, the marketing folks would get together and come up with the product idea, and they would determine what they wanted it to look like, what they wanted it to do, who their consumer target was, why they thought it would matter. Then they would get the designer and they would figure out the form of it, right, and the function of it, and work with the innovation engineers. And then when they were done with all of that, they would go to the word person, as we call them, and say, can you put some words on this? And so that didn't happen across the company, but in certain areas, right, where we were doing 3D product, that's kind of how that process went. And it always bothered me because I believed in writing an editorial. We were all wannabe psychologists. I believe we knew more, right, about human motivation and behavior than many of the other people in the company. And so I thought, if we really deeply understand human motivation and behavior and relationships, then we should be at the front part of that conversation. We should be having conversations about why, right? What is the need they're trying to serve, right? What is the problem they're trying to solve? And what are the many ways they might be able to solve it? And so I told her my purpose is to help transform the writing and editorial community from people who put words on things, right, to thought leaders who drive the future of this business. And so that wasn't necessarily about altruism, right? It wasn't about charity or some of the words that people attach to purpose when folks say, I want to live my purpose. But it was very much a purposeful goal. Does that make sense? So I'd love you guys to take just a minute and write down some thoughts. I'm not going to ask you to share anything. Write down some thoughts about how you believe you can bring your purpose to life at work. So when you think about your work that you're doing right now, whether you're a student, right, you're in education, whatever your role is, what is a purposeful value, right? Value meaning contribution, you believe you can bring to the work? I'll just give you a minute to write down some thoughts. All right, this is something you can finish up later if you have additional thoughts. The reason working on purpose matters is, well, there are a lot of reasons, but the benefits to you are things like energy, right? When you're working on purpose, you bring more energy to the work. Things like resilience. So I always tell people, gosh, when you're doing it for a bigger, greater reason, right, and you don't get the accolades or sometimes the recognition from folks around you, you still feel that the work you're doing matters. When you're doing it to get the accolades or to get the pay, right, and you don't kind of have a purpose thread through the work you do, you're often kind of looking for external signals to make you feel good about the energy you're spending and the time you're spending. So there are a lot of benefits to working on purpose, and it's just something to think about. The second thing, what we really want is respect, right? We want to be respected as a capable leader with a unique point of view, a sought-after asset, right? Thoughtfully leveraged for success. I say that on purpose because we each have unique skills and talents that we bring to the table. You want to be respected for those unique skills and talents. And, let's not lie to each other. You want people to know what they are, kind of, yeah? If you feel like there's something you're differently good at, as I like to say, you're something that you're really, really good at, you have a natural gift for, every time you do it, good things seem to happen. You want the folks around you, right, and the folks above you to understand what that unique gift or skill is and to respect it, right, and to think about how to leverage it for the good of the whole. So naturally, we have a role in that. How can we think about what ways we're going to leverage the skill? But we also want other people to bring us into the loop when it matters and when we can really make change. So I don't know how many of you have seen it's kind of all over the place now, but have seen the research. I got this from MSCI, that the tipping point for women making a difference on boards, corporate boards, is 3, right? So we always talk about having a seat at the table. Women want a seat at the table. But the research says 1 woman at the table can sometimes be as good as no women at the table because that woman is sometimes perceived as the female voice. Right? So say you have 10 people around a table and one of them's a woman, and then the woman shares a point of view. Other people say things like, or they behave in a way that says things like, well, thanks for your female perspective versus your experienced, right, your knowledgeable, your insightful perspective. Thanks for your woman's perspective. So the tipping point is 3, right? 3 women at the table. Now, we all know there are lots of boards and leadership tables where we don't even have close to that right now. So the thing is, if you are going to be the one at the table, or one of 2, or even one of 5, how will you show up? How will you show up? How can you ensure that you will be heard, right? What is it that you bring to that table? So kind of back to understanding your unique value, right, and your gifts. How do you contribute? And then how will you be heard? Does anyone have an experience or a story where you felt like you had something to bring to a conversation that was unique and additive and important, and you just kind of sat there thinking about, how am I going to say this in a way that people will hear me? Am I the only one? Has anyone else ever had that experience? How am I going to phrase this, right? How will I say it? How will I get into the dialogue, in a way that folks will listen to me and hear me? I don't know that. I know some men have that experience because some of it is a personality thing and a preference thing, but many more women have that experience where they're kind of second guessing and trying to do all this, word alphabet soup, in their heads about how they're going to say something. So we need to make sure when we are there that we have a voice. Because when we don't, people wonder, what's the big deal? Why are we having these women's conferences all the time? So if you're going to be there, have a voice, right? You got to own it. The third thing we want is growth. Women leaders value the learning process. Everybody values the learning process, but women really want to learn. We want to continually get better. And sometimes we do that by linking up with other people, right, who teach us. We have a mutual learning experience. Sometimes we do that through promotion, through stretch opportunities. There are a lot of ways we continue to grow. We talked a little bit on the panel about some of those ways. We read, right? We expose ourselves to different ideas and different environments and cultures. So the growth process is very important, and what companies need to understand now is they need to create an environment, right, that supports people's ongoing development. So I read this article just last week, and the title of it is, some of you may have seen it, it was on LinkedIn and it got shared like hundreds of thousands of times. The title was, Why Millennials Keep Dumping You. Did anybody else see that? We have a couple people who saw it. Why millennials keep dumping you. And one of the examples was, they go into an environment and someone will say, well, our metric is ROI. And we check, we'll evaluate the ROI at the end of this fiscal year. And if we made that particular metric, right, then everybody will get a raise. And they're essentially saying, who wants to wait around for 12 months to find out if the one metric you had, right, if we succeeded so that we can get a raise? People want to grow continually. They don't want to sit back for 12 months and wait for that next growth opportunity, right? So what does that look like? What does that look like to support that? And how do we support that for ourselves? So reach, right? And in order to kind of really have that transformational growth that I think some of us want and need, there's risk involved, right? There's personal risk involved. Absolutely professional risk, but also personal risk. So here's a question, and I'd like you to take a second to jot down a couple thoughts about it. When you think about what you really want to do next, and go on and think big, why not, right? We're all here in this space together. If there's a dream you have, or a vision, or an opportunity you'd really like to wrap your arms around, what's holding you back? Is there a barrier you can identify that you can commit to thinking differently about? And a little before we wrap up, I'll kind of take you through a bit of a process that'll make that all make sense. Is there a barrier you can name now that you can commit to thinking differently about? And I say that on purpose. I didn't say eliminating, because sometimes it's not always in your control, right? Just take a second and jot down any thoughts you have about a barrier that might be in your way. Some of us were like, barrier is X. I know it. I live with it every day. Some are like, what is there? Maybe I don't have any, which would be amazing. I would say you're an anomaly in a good way. All right, so capture some thoughts about that. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier on the panel, but one exercise that I have found so useful, and by the way, this works not only in the professional context, but in the personal context, in any context you can imagine, is to write it down, is to make it tangible for yourself. And again, kind of get that fear, if you will, out of your head and onto the page. So we kind of write down, what's the worst that could happen if I did A? Right? If I went after this, if I had this conversation, if I put my name in the hat, if I asked for a raise, if I gave my boss this difficult feedback, right? Whatever it is that might be a barrier for you, what is the worst that could happen if you took that step? And then write down, what is the best that could happen if you took that step? But start with the worst. What's the worst that could happen if you took the step? I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And now if you haven't yet, again, we're not here to finish every exercise because of course we don't have time. Just giving you the tools. Flip over to the best. So the question here, it's on the slide, I know you can read, is which list is more compelling? Often, once we get what's swirling around in our minds onto the page, we can see that the benefits, right, if things go well, far outweigh the risks if they don't. So I'll give you a personal example that it's high stakes, but not as high as maybe your career. 3 years ago, my husband and I were building a house. And it was a custom build. And, you know, of course, as you go through a process like that, there are lots of things you want. And every single time we had a conversation about something we wanted, he would say, well, I'm just going to go to him and ask for that. I'm just going to ask him to put that in there. And I would be like, well, but, you know, the value of that is such and such thousands of dollars. And then they're going to up the price. He's like, no, they won't. It's like, what? How does this work? Throughout the entire process, this man asked for every single thing he wanted. And when I would say, they're going to get annoyed. They're going to think you're taking advantage of them. You know, they're going to feel like this is not a mutually beneficial arrangement. You know, he would say, they can say no. They can say no. That was always his very simple answer. And then every time he said that, I would be like, yeah? I guess they can say no. So my what's the worst that could happen list would have been the equivalent of they could say no. How bad is that, right? In my mind, I was making it into this big drama fest, but it really wasn't. And we tend to do that sometimes. Okay, so want 4 is flexibility. And I know there was a question earlier about work-life balance and flexibility, and obviously this is a very important topic for lots of good reason, but we don't want to choose between our success and our sanity. That's really not a choice. Nobody wants to make that choice, right? And so for me, there are some environments that just are inflexible. That is the nature of the environment, right? That's the corporate culture. You know, the policies are not flexible. It is what it is. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're working in an environment like that, does this work for me? Does this work for my life? And maybe it does for a time. Right? Maybe you can say, well, I can do this for 2 or 3 more years, but that's it. I can't do it anymore after that, right? You got to time bound it. We all want flexibility. I do believe, as I said before, that corporate cultures who want to retain top talent are going to have to figure this out. I personally prefer an outcome-based culture. So here are the deliverables. Here's what we have to achieve. Here's the timeline within which we need to achieve them. Now, I don't have to tell you exactly how to go do that. And I certainly don't need your butt in the seat to do it, because that's kind of irrelevant for certain goals. Some goals it is not irrelevant. Some goals it is, right? So if you think through the lens of an outcome-based culture, all of a sudden things become possible that weren't possible before. So from the company standpoint, I think we need to think about how to be more flexible. But as individuals, as individual leaders, we have to determine what our stakes in the ground are. And we all have them. So some are stakes in the ground. They're inflexible to us, right? They're on the level of beliefs and values and things that we will not compromise. And some of us have things that are wiggly. I prefer, you know, to do this, but I'm open to doing this occasionally. So you kind of have to draw out, right, to capture that universe for yourself so that you know what you're willing to give up and what you're not willing to give up. And you should never compromise your values at work, is my personal opinion. Never. Because the person you end up most upset with is you. Okay, so we want flexibility. This is an interesting kind of different way to look at the notion of balance. Has anybody ever taken on a new job that you felt woefully ill-equipped to do? We got some hands, yes. So most of us have been in that situation, right? And in corporate, we call that a stretch assignment, right? Some people call it a glass cliff assignment, when it's like, if I fail, I'm going all the way down, smush, crash, never to get up. Those are really bad. But what I like to share with people is it's important to strike a balance in all things. So it's not just work and life, it's also sometimes the known and the unknown. And if you think about the fact that that can be in any category, it kind of starts to make sense. So if you put it in the context of the stretch assignment, right, and you say, okay, generally a healthy ratio is there's 70%, it can be 60-40 too. There's 70% of this job, this opportunity that I'm somewhat familiar with. You don't have to be an expert, but I've had visibility to it. I can do certain aspects of it, right? I know the people over there maybe. I'm familiar with the industry, right? Or the specialty, or kind of, I'm somewhat familiar with that. And then 30%, I have no idea what I'm doing. If you get too much higher than 40%, I have no idea what I'm doing, it's bad. It's a bad day. It's not only bad for you, it's bad for your team if you're leading one, and it can be very bad for the company, right? So I share that with people not to be risk averse, but to say balance comes in all forms and in all contexts. And this is one that we don't often think that much about, but I've found it a very helpful ratio to kind of work with. So does that make sense? Just as you got some known stuff and you got some unknown stuff. It's okay to have some unknown, but you don't want the unknown to overtake the known. Got it? All right. So the last one that I wanted to hit on is alignment. And again, we talked about harmony earlier. I do believe that women thrive in cultures that reflect their values, right? So we've talked about beliefs and values and why that matters. But we thrive in environments that are in alignment with who we are. And that doesn't have to be a 100% overlap, right? But that we feel like we generally are on the same team. We believe in the same things from kind of a high and broad level. I feel like I'm doing good, when I go to work. And again, good can be qualified in many, many different ways. It doesn't have to be that you're solving world hunger, but you feel like when you go home at the end of the day, you've done some good, right? You've done a good thing. So alignment is very important, I believe. And anyone at work, not just women, can only thrive for so long in an environment where they feel misaligned. Because misalignment is kind of like that quiet thing. It doesn't necessarily show up, in the first year or two as a big problem, but it wears on you, right? It kind of sucks your energy dry after a while, and it doesn't replenish itself. Does that make sense? So alignment is something that's very important to be aware of. And so I often ask people to think about, what kind of environment do you want to work in? And this isn't all about, I want to work in an environment that's all about kids or not about kids, right? It can be that it's a family-oriented environment, or it can be things like, I want to work in a collaborative environment, right? Because you can be in a really collaborative environment, which maybe goes along with how you like to work. You can be in a very hierarchical environment, which might not, right? And so do you want to work in a rigid environment? Do you like to work in a very organic, kind of flexible environment, innovative, process rich, So I ask people to give some thought to that. What kind of environment do you want to work in? And if it's not quite there yet, are there ways you can influence it? Sometimes you can't influence the entire company, but you can influence your division, right? You can influence your team. Or you can influence your own little bubble, your cubicle, or whatever it is you might be working in right now. Okay? So culture is something that we should give more credence to as we kind of look at, moving ahead. So I want to go through this with you. I have found it to be one of the most enlightening exercises I've done with groups. And it's not, again, I didn't make it up. It existed long before I started using it, but I have found it to be really powerful. And it's what we call the belief cycle. So earlier on the panel, Jen asked about perspective shifting, right? And I was going to speak up about this, but then I was like, no, it's in my keynote. I'm going to wait. So this is the belief cycle. And the essential premise is, we all have, you can have a belief, right? And a belief is defined as anything you think about so many times that it becomes a belief. It's a thought you have repeatedly. You have that thought so much, right, that eventually it becomes a belief. So if you have a belief, that belief gives you a certain feeling, right? That feeling will often influence the way you behave, and your behavior is in direct relationship to your results. That's how the cycle works. Everybody gets it in theory, but we're going to, I see the time, thank you, I'm late, I'm golden. I have to 1:40, right? Okay, great. So we're gonna do a little exercise together, not physical exercise, I'm not gonna ask you to get up. But I want you to think of a negative belief about women in leadership. So think about it from the standpoint of something you might personally believe about why it's hard or right, impossible or frustrating. So somebody share a personal kind of, it doesn't have to be your personal, but personal type belief that's kind of negative in nature about women's leadership. Anybody have a thought about that? Yes. I'm there as the ooh, that is a good one. Thank you. I didn't pay for anything like that. Okay, so if I believe, right, if I've been invited to a really important meeting, let's say, right, or a presentation or a panel or something like that, and I'm the only woman, and I believe I'm there as the token, how might that make me feel? Anybody? Feelings associated with that thought, that belief. Inferior. What else? Self-conscious. What else? Frustrated. Timid. Disrespected. What else might that make me feel? Imposter syndrome. Very good. So if I'm feeling frustrated, disrespected, timid, inferior, right? I feel like I'm suffering from imposter syndrome. How might I behave up there on that stage? Timidly. How else might I behave? What am I doing? I'm closed, maybe? Nervous? Like I don't belong there? I'm acting like I don't belong there? I'm not participating, right? I may not be saying much. I behave in a way that says I'm not very confident, I don't feel comfortable, right? So if that's how I'm behaving, visualize that with me. At the end of the presentation or the panel, when people get the feedback forms, what do you think they're going to say about my participation? What will my result be? Right. What will my result be? My result will be, didn't really participate, that wasn't a great value add, you know, I don't know why she was there, seemed uncomfortable. See how that works? Somebody give me a positive thought about women in leadership. A positive belief. I've earned it. Right? I've earned it. So they've asked me to be on this really important panel with these really important people because I've earned my stripes and I deserve to be here. How might I feel if I believe that? Confident. How else might I feel? Empowered. What else? Smart. Did somebody else say something? Capable. Right. So I feel I'm up there, I feel confident, I feel smart, I feel capable, right? I probably feel valued. How will I behave if I feel that way? I will be sassy, perhaps, absolutely. How else might I behave? Confident. What might I do? I'll smile more, probably. I'll speak up, I'll participate. Right? Well, what are they going to say on the evaluation form then? That I was awesome, that I was the awesomest of the awesome, whoever awesome, is probably what they will say. And so the belief cycle is a powerful thing because while we all know theoretically, right, we create our own reality by what we think and believe, we don't always realize when we're having a negative thought that we could absolutely, in that moment, right? Be signing our own fate. And so I share this with you to say that we as women have a lot of things, certainly, for sure, still against us, right? In the environment, external forces that make it difficult at times for us to reach the heights we believe we're worthy of. I share this because the last thing we need working against us is our own minds and our own hearts. And so the consciousness, right, of how your thoughts and your beliefs influence your feelings, dictate your behaviors, right, drive to your results, is something really important. And then lastly, I'll share with you my favorite quote, because I believe it matters, which is lead from where you are with everything you've got. Purpose is not about position. Impact is not about position. Titles are nice, the money that comes with it is nicer, you know, the influence, all that other good stuff. But impact, right, working on purpose, making a difference, is not about position. It's about power. And each and every one of us has that in spades. It's a matter of whether and how we're accessing it. So, does that make sense? Does anybody think I missed something that you want, other than chocolate and to be warmer? Was there a big want that you're like, whatever, because she didn't say X? I want to thank you. Did you have one? Oh, I thought your hand went up. Probably because I... Oh, yeah, because your hair was... Okay, got it. We were twinning at the moment. Okay, well, thank you all for...
Thank you for the one thing I have to say, alignment. You spoke to me with alignment.
Good, good.
Thank you on that.
Yeah, of course, makes a difference. Any questions or for me or thoughts you want to share? An idea you have that I didn't quite get to? We have about 5-6 minutes for that. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, because I've done this from personal experience, when you were talking about the fact that being the token woman at the meeting,
Yeah.
I work in an industry that's very male dominated.
Right.
And maybe it's because when I was younger and a little naive and didn't really care too much, I was the only woman in a lot of the meetings or events. And I think I took it upon myself, knowing coming in that I knew I had the experience and the background for being there,
Right.
that I took it as an opportunity to show that I belong there as a woman. And that if I didn't start trying to build that rapport with the men that were in the area, that no other women would ever make it there.
That's right.
So I think partly when you go back to mindset, it's not so much feeling that I didn't belong there, but how can I make this work, not only for me, but for women that would come after me.
Absolutely.
And I just think, again, it's your mindset.
Yeah. So your belief in that instance was, this is an opportunity.
Right.
Right. That was the thought you had.
Exactly.
Kind of that turned into the belief. This is a great opportunity for me.
Yeah, because I've been told again in our industry, or women, well, you can't go there because, you can't do this because you won't be accepted. I'm like, oh, no, you don't tell me that. I'll figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah. So you got it. You need to teach a class on that one. Thank you. Appreciate it. Did I see a hand back there? Thought I saw another one. No. Any other questions or thoughts? Somebody else was fixing their hair. No? We got it all figured out? We're ready to straighten up our beliefs and get some different results and all that good stuff? All right. Well, I appreciate your time so much today and your attention, and thanks again for having me. It's awesome. Thank you.